Oh, boy. That's it.
I've been riding horses since I can remember, really. So, yeah, living with the horses would be the dream. Walking out the back door and seeing them would just be fantastic.
No, mate. You're a good boy.
Charlotte, Stacey and Austin Pond have moved back in with Austin's parents in Tasmania to save for a house deposit. So they have to keep their 2 horses at a neighbour's property.
We're probably roughly around the 10% mark, I'd say, maybe 11 or 12, depending on the house price. But it's been, it's been a pretty hard slog. Like, we've been saving pretty well. So, did you open up the new invites you got?
They're looking for a property around the $300,000 mark, which would mean they would have needed a $60,000 deposit to avoid lenders' mortgage insurance. But just a week before Saturday's election, they finally had some good news.
Our new First Home Loan Deposit Scheme, I announced today, will enable first home owners to buy their home with a deposit of down to 5%. This will make a big difference.
It's great to see a lot of first home buyers out and about.
The scheme means the government will guarantee the additional amount needed to reach 20%, allowing borrowers to avoid paying thousands of dollars in mortgage insurance. It's only available to singles earning less than $125,000 a year or couples on less than $200,000.
It starts opening doors to, well, maybe in a year or so, we'll be living in a house as opposed to 5 years.
Come on.
Nadine McAllister and her son Ollie have also moved back in with her parents in regional Queensland to save for a house deposit.
We'd have to save about $40,000. That would probably take us anywhere up to 5 years, I'd think, which is certainly not... I don't want to live with my parents for another 5 years. Do you want Vegemite and cheese or peanut butter and jam?
The nursing student believes the government's policy could cut that time in half.
We're living 4.5 people in a 2-bedroom house. So it's definitely going to change our lives. Space-wise, it's definitely going to be a life changer.
The deposit's arguably the biggest hurdle to buying a house in Australia. So it used to take something like 5 or 6 years for the average person on the average income to buy the average house, to save a 20% deposit in order to buy that house. Now it's taking something more like 10 years. They all make judgments. And they don't...
The Grattan Institute's Brendan Coates estimates around 127,000 Australians earn under the wage cap and already have a 5% deposit. But he says that doesn't guarantee them entry into the property market.
The reality is quite a lot of those people will never get access to this scheme because they may struggle to ever be able to afford a loan based on the bank regulations around how much you've got to be able to repay.
Getting that loan could be easier from today, after the banking regulator proposed scaling back its requirement for borrowers to show that they could repay a loan at a 7% interest rate. At the same time, the Reserve Bank has signalled that it's poised to cut interest rates next month. Combined, some economists say those measures could see house prices begin to stabilise.
If APRA does in fact remove this floor, some people will be able to borrow more and some will take advantage of that, and that will help. But that's not a substitute for lower interest rates, so it's complementary, but it's not a substitute.
And the scheme won't help all first home buyers. It's capped at 10,000 borrowers, approximately 10% of the Australians who bought their first home last year.
It means the policy's either going to be fairly irrelevant, it's not going to do a lot to boost home ownership. If it did do a lot to boost home ownership, if the scheme was uncapped, it would simply lead to more demand, which would push up prices, which would hurt first home buyers rather than helping them.
In a market where, well, at the moment, house prices are still continuing to fall and the sort of 1 to 2 year outlook is reasonably uncertain, I'm not sure that encouraging a cohort of buyers without an established credit history to take out loans at a high LVR is sort of hugely sensible. I mean, the point with this is that the money ultimately has to be paid back.
JP Morgan economist Sally Auld says it could also mean some first home buyers end up in negative equity, owing more than their property is worth. And if they default, the taxpayer will foot the bill.
I think the risk with these sorts of policies is that we look back in 5 years' time and something that started off quite small and for only 10,000 people suddenly turns into something much bigger and much more potentially costly for the government.
Thank you very much.
This is just the latest in a long line of Australian government policies to encourage home ownership. As early as 1918, the government was helping ex-service personnel get into the market with low-interest loans. In the 60s, the Menzies government started paying grants to young first homeowners. The following decade, Whitlam replaced the grant with income tax deductions for mortgage interest payments. In 1976, Fraser reintroduced and boosted the Home Deposit Assistance Grant. Then in 83, Hawke replaced it with an even bigger grant before scrapping it in 1990. 10 years later, it was reintroduced by Howard and in 2008 temporarily boosted by the Rudd government during the global financial crisis. And in 2017, the coalition government introduced a scheme to allow first home buyers to save for a deposit within their superannuation fund.
It's endemic of Australian housing policy over the last 3 decades that we've done the things that sound good but won't work, rather than facing what are much more politically difficult choices to boost supply by changing planning rules or to change the tax system that would make housing more affordable in the long run, but they're much more politically contentious in the short term. Until we pick up some of those kinds of policies and tell the Australian people squarely that's what it's going to take to improve home ownership in Australia, we're likely to keep going backwards.
And they had really good views, good spots for photos.
Those views are good. Yeah, that's cool.
As Austin and Charlotte plan their wedding for later in the year, they're hoping the new policy will mean they won't have to start their married lives living with their parents.
It would be fantastic. I couldn't really imagine starting life as a newlywed living with my in-laws, as lovely as they are. So yeah, having somewhere that you can come home and relax and call your own would be perfect.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.